Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, ladies. I am back with another episode of Coffee Chats with Aisha. And I know I say this all the time, but I'm really excited about today's conversation. I'm an outdoorist myself, a hiker and enthusiast. So this conversation particularly has me geeking out. We are talking about all things adventuring, community, and self-discovery as shared by our guest, Nadah. In this insightful episode, ladies, we're going to be diving into the creation and the evolution of an adventure community that is designed specifically for Muslim women, seamlessly blending faith, exploration, and self-discovery. The founder here will share the organization's inspiring journey, emphasizing, the role of faith while also fostering a sense of community. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Nadah. How are you doing today?
Wa alaikum assalam, Aisha. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited too about this conversation, not biased at all.
Oh my gosh, I'm super excited. It's going to be a really lovely episode. Well, folks, if you don't know Nadah, let me give you a little bit of a deep dive of who she is. She's amazing. She's a technologist, trekker, and traveler. She was born and raised in California and always loved exploring through the outdoors. After being laid off in big tech, she took her passions to the next level and started traveling more, and then also launched an adventure community and travel company called Metwa Collective to increase access to the outdoors for Muslim women in the United States. Since then, she's moved to the East Coast for a fellowship in public interest tech, and since then, she has been trying her best to manage her diverse interests in both professional and personal spheres, and loves to speak with others following an unconventional path. So welcome. Speaking of unconventionality, today's conversation really speaks to breaking barriers, breaking stereotypes, because Metwa Collective is literally doing what I wished happened 5-10 years ago. So you really groundbreaking work, and I'm really excited to dive deeper into the who, what, where, how, and why. But before we get there, fun question I always ask our guests, because given the title of the podcast, do you like coffee? And if so, do you have a go-to specific order?
I love this question too. I would say I do like coffee. I'm really basic when it comes to coffee, latte girl through and through. Depending on the season, I will go for a pumpkin spice latte in the fall, especially now that I moved to the East Coast and having a lot of places and coffee shops that have really cozy vibes. Just getting a nice seasonal latte is usually my go-to.
Oh my gosh. Well, people know on my channel that I'm not a coffee enthusiast, but if it's a cute little spot, I will indulge. Though my order is way more basic. It is just a vanilla latte. Iced, never hot, never hot. We'll start this conversation out just with the foundation and the vision, and would love to just start from the beginning of the entire sort of history of this organization. What is Metwa Collective? And then perhaps, obviously, can you share the inspiration behind creating this adventure community that is for Muslim women, and it's rooted in faith, exploration, and self-discovery?
I'll give a little bit of a brief on how this even started in my own background and how I fell into it, and kind of what you said. I was in a call earlier this week with a couple of other founders that are starting their own companies in the outdoor industry. And we talked about our why. And my main why was because I wished I had something like this 4 years ago, when I first slowly started to get out there, to hike more, to travel more. But I lacked that sort of image or vision of someone that was like me doing something similar. And there was always this constant back and forth, and, talking to my parents and kind of trying to see, is there anyone else doing this, or is it just me? The more that I started to share my own travels and adventures on social media, having a lot of other girls reach out and say, oh, I've wanted to go camping or hiking, but I've never had anyone to go with. Or I can never find friends to travel with me to these places, people that are more into adventuring and roughing it a little bit more, not really into like the luxury travel. So it seemed like there were these common threads of folks that wanted to do it, but nothing that really brought us all together. And I've, been involved in community in different ways over the years. And so I thought, why not bring people together? And I just put out a story February last year. It's almost been exactly a year, seeing if any girls would be interested in going on a camping trip with me. Over the President's Day weekend, it was a couple weeks in advance that I was pitching this idea, and 50 girls had responded. And so I realized, okay, there's interest. There's girls that want to get out there and are willing to make the time to come. And so quickly got to planning, and we did a first pilot camping trip, and that was a success. And it was very fulfilling for me because we brought together 20 girls and we just spent the whole weekend in a national park, hiking, stargazing, praying, and cooking outside. And it was just so therapeutic and meaningful. I'd also been laid off a couple months before. And so, I had all this free time. I was trying to figure out what to do next. And so I thought, okay, let me see where this could go. And I just started planning more group trips after that. And that's how Metwa Collective was born.
Let's talk about growth. You guys are hitting a year?
A year in a couple of weeks. And
oh my gosh.
I had little goals for growth in terms of people we were reaching, number of trips over the past few months. I'd also started an accelerator program with REI and Founded Outdoors that supports people of color, starting small businesses in the outdoor industry. Literally checked all the boxes, and we were accepted back in October. The program is January to March. And it's been such a supportive space and has really allowed me to figure out how much potential Metwa has and where we could take it. But long story short, I submitted in the form, some of our goals were to have 4 trips in the first 6 months, and we're doing 5 in the first 2 months, 2024. So alhamdulillah, we've achieved that. And yeah, a couple of reels that I put up on Instagram, literally while I was in the airport at the end of December, traveling internationally for a trek. I just made a quick reel while I was just chilling there, and ended up going viral, and so many people found out about the group. And so I think that it's really resonated with a lot of women because there's something that's been missing, and like I mentioned, finding others that were just as free-spirited and ambitious and passionate about exploration, but just didn't have the community to go with. And so I'm really excited to see where we can take Metwa Collective. After just a year, we made it to this point, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Wow, subhanAllah, love that. We love celebrating wins here. So everything you just shared, alhamdulillah, Allahumma barak, only more growth to come. Perhaps myself joining one of these trips whenever my work schedule permits, inshallah. So speaking of, I know the event, Metwa Collective kind of touches on several different components. Faith that you mentioned, Islam being the forefront, exploring, but also self-discovery. So I want to touch in that component of self-discovery. In what ways does Metwa encourage self-discovery, maybe on these trips or just generally in the online community? What does that look like with the members, and how do you see this component contributing to, touching upon personal growth and empowerment of the members as well?
Yeah, so as I was getting into the outdoors, I would say in 2021 was when I started visiting national parks and taking long road trips. We were feeling really stifled, during the pandemic, not being able to get out. And for me, being outside is really therapeutic and just really grounding. And so I would just do really long walks, and being in nature and being able to disconnect and just feel really grounded and feel closer to your faith was really important to me. But as I was taking this to the next level, I was doing little hikes here and there, whoever would come with me. But I started to train for harder hikes, eventually doing international treks that were over a week, 2 weeks. When I was finally laid off, I went to Nepal and did Everest Base Camp. I went to Tanzania and did Mount Kilimanjaro. And these were more of those really intense adventures that is not everyone's cup of tea. And I would say that what really got me into it was following a lot of Arab women that were conquering these mountains and were mountaineers. And I went with Rahala on my first trek, which is a group that's based in Dubai and really caters to a lot of Arabs. And coincidentally, a lot of Muslims join their trips. And so I had this common theme of identity tying us together. One of my first trips that had a girl from Saudi and a guy from Kuwait. And even though we were coming from different countries, it was the fact that we were all Muslim and we just had similar culture and values and faith that really gave us a lot to connect on. And while I was doing that trek, I remember seeing the other American groups on the mountain. And even though I'm American, I was so grateful for the space that I was in instead, and felt like I had a lot more to connect with these people. So that was kind of the idea with Metwa, is that, we naturally gravitate more towards people that we identify with. And I personally find a lot of inspiration from seeing covered Muslim women also doing these incredible things. Some of my reflections from Hijab Day was that, there's a lot of really cool Muslim women that are covered wearing hijab that are doing these incredibly ambitious sports, but we just don't see a lot of them. And so one aspect of Metwa that I started last March during Ramadan was I just was posting a lot of these amazing women and their accomplishments. And I was inspired, and it kind of creates this domino effect of you seeing someone like you doing these really cool things and then providing a vision of you also doing it. And then we're cultivating those experiences through our weekend trips. The trips are kind of starting off easy. We're doing like hikes that are a couple of miles, nothing too intense. My goal is to do more international trips and do more of these treks and find other girls like me that want to get into some of the hardcore mountaineering. But since then, it's just opened the door and shown some of these girls that maybe never had a chance to go off for a weekend and do an activity like this and to disconnect, that there's an opportunity for you to do that and for you to see other Muslim women like you participating in these spaces.
That's exactly what this podcast is for. It's me learning from Muslim women who are killing it, like doing really cool things and hopefully serving as a platform for other women to get inspired. So love that component of identity and self-discovery. And a part of that, our identity as Muslim women is being Muslim, is being, a champion of what it means to uphold Islam. And so I would love to kind of now pivot in terms of how do you believe faith, like Islam and Deen, how does that play a role in fostering the sense of community within Matwa? And then maybe does what unique challenges or opportunities, because we love celebrating wins, does this present as well?
I mean, I think faith is underlying this initiative, I would feel uncomfortable in certain spaces just because of, being Muslim, there's a lot of things I will not, and being a Muslim woman, there's a lot of things I won't participate in, whether that's like certain overnight group trips that are mixed, maybe going with non-Muslim groups where there's a lot of drinking and just things I'm not comfortable with. And so I'd have that boundary. And it just started feeling like there was limited opportunities for me to do this with people that also had a similar faith and value system. And so we tried to cultivate within these group trips practices like praying together, having short little reflections, being able to just talk more naturally with the other girls in the group about the things that you're going through. And you really start to notice that the types of girls that these trips attract are really welcoming and grounded and like open to new experiences. You know what you're getting yourself into when you're going on like a glamping trip or a camping trip. We're not, on this like luxury 5-star, hotel resort experience. You really are kind of going through some of these difficult activities. You're able to, relax after a long day and really open up. And I think that just makes people more open and welcome to sharing some of their own maybe struggles or what they're going through. And I think the outdoors are rooted in our faith, and we just don't talk about it a lot. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would go and hike up this mountain to Cave Hira and would just spend hours there in deep reflection. And I truly believe a lot of us have that innately within us, where we want to be secluded sometimes. We want to just sit in silence and reflect, and there's no better place to do that than around God's creation. And so our goal is to create those spaces and those experiences and to go back to our roots and our faith through these outdoor trips.
Awesome. I love to hear that, subhanAllah. I think part of our deen is really introspective and allows us, encourage us to kind of be with our mind. And the best way to do that, I've heard from even my local sheikhs and scholars, is go take a walk, go out there, go experience nature. And you're that just more in awe of Allah, of the creation. And it's a powerful experience. And for you guys to cultivate in an environment that does that over a shared identity, shared faith, is really beautiful, really beautiful. So speaking of, I think the second part of our conversation, I wanted to dive deeper into, the community aspect of building not only, physical community, but an online community. There's so many nuances and intricacies when it comes to balance and maintenance. And then of course the challenges of generally running a business, running a company and organization. So kind of wanted to talk about all of that in different ways. Yeah. First thing that I wanted to kind of touch upon is creating that space, creating a space where people feel trusted, welcomed, and accepted is crucial, but also difficult. Everyone is different and comfortable with different things. So how does Matwa sort of kind of welcome individuals from various backgrounds, various different faith commitments? What does that balance of accepting, all look like at Matwa? And how do you guys go about navigating, different faces, different experiences, different backgrounds as well?
it started as like a blend of an online community and in-person community, because alongside the Instagram as it was growing, we were also running a couple of group trips. And I think the online community really attracted a lot of people, because even me, when I'm like going through the pictures from a trip and I'm like posting a picture of the 20 girls that I took on a hike, while I'm hiking, I'm doing a double take myself. I've never seen 20, like a majority of these girls are covered too. And so hijabi girls that are just like out here in nature. It's something that we don't see a lot of. And so I think that's where people really gravitated towards this community, because it's so unique and novel. And we haven't really created spaces where we're sharing our stories and experiences like this. And I think you kind of just get a sense of, like I mentioned, the types of women that this space has attracted. It's people that are really open-minded and welcoming and open to adventure and exploration. And so, subhanAllah, like the types of people that have joined these trips and have signed up and been there in person have come, sometimes not even knowing anybody else that's signing up to join, but you kind of know you'll find that connection, that underlying love for, the unknown, the uncertainty, adventure, and also faith that we have connecting all of us. That I try to like reassure folks that are a little bit uncertain about coming, not knowing anybody, that you really will have like these bonds in the sisterhood that you can't really cultivate in a lot of spaces. So that is like kind of in terms of the in-person group trips, and alongside those, because like I was one person in the beginning, I can only take so many girls out on a hike without, spreading myself too thin, that I wanted this online community to exist. Like I mentioned, sharing other stories, we did a whole featured series, trying to like build that community so that we can eventually have more trips, have more girls involved, in the organization, leading trips. And so I really want this to like grow into being a community initiative and to bring other people on board, for us to like, reach as many women as possible that would find this as a space that they wish they had had. And I love hearing those stories of girls that find the Instagram or sign up for a trip and they say, I wish I had this, or I wish I knew about this 2 years ago. And so alhamdulillah, I'm glad that we're filling that need and people are really resonating with the mission.
Alhamdulillah. It's awesome to hear. And so speaking of, growing growth as a business, what does that look like? Running an organization that touches on so many beautiful things, has so many perhaps challenges. Can you elaborate on some of them and how have you overcome?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Running it all.
I have gone. I'm like going through a crash course on like everything, learning as I go. I would describe it as like building the train tracks or assembling the train tracks as the train is running. I like operate in complete chaos sometimes. This has been more than a full-time job for me, honestly. I also moved to the East Coast, like I mentioned, for a fellowship. And so I'm just trying to balance a lot of things. But the Metla work, I feel like I'm so passionate about that I will willingly pour my heart and soul into it. And it's like my baby, and I love to see how it's grown, subhanAllah. But, organizations, businesses, companies like this don't like survive with only one person. And like I mentioned, I really want this to be a community-driven initiative and company where I'm not the face behind it. Kind of how it started. Everyone knew me as the girl that was running all of this. But I'm really excited right now to be building a team, to have other women that are also experienced with the outdoors and traveling, run some of the group trips that we're planning for 2024. I'm learning so much in this accelerator program with Founded Outdoors and RAI about just like the business and finances side, and like super overwhelming for me as someone who's an engineer before. But I always say that as an engineer, like I was focused on problem solving, and I know how to learn. So the first few months as I was building this, I was like figuring out what I needed to do to keep this running, and just kept doing it, so that there was no precedent set for anything. And a couple of girls were asking questions about how to like pursue their own interests, or being an entrepreneur is a challenge in and of itself. Now I would say you don't need to have all the answers. Like I'm still figuring things out as I go. I'm very open to nasiha and, experimenting with different things. And if something doesn't work, it's okay. You just go back to the drawing board. But just kind of innately knowing the community and who I'm serving, because this was me a couple of years ago when I didn't have anybody to travel with, and trying to build something that will fill that need. That's what's been keeping me going. And I think at some point you just reach this threshold where like, okay, I am one person. I will be honest and say I've been burnt out the past couple of weeks. And so I'm like scaling back and thinking of long-term goals and how this can be more of a sustainable initiative. And like I mentioned, a lot of it is building a team, focusing on like the growing pains, in terms of just processes, like what platforms we're using, what systems we're using. And so the engineering side of me really likes thinking about that. And yeah, just collaborating as much as possible with existing groups and businesses has really helped a lot.
Super cool. Love to hear that. It's always, practice makes perfect. And you hear it in the business world, it's like iterate, iterate,
Mm-hmm.
iterate. Like you just have to keep
Yes.
experimenting and keep
Yeah.
figuring
Yeah.
out what
Yeah.
works and
And
what
so I
doesn't
always
work.
say, yeah, like if something flops, it flops. That's okay. It's a learning experience. And so for me, it's like, if we can just kind of, it's so many girls have been asking, when are the next trips coming out, for the rest of 2024? And it's like, there's all these growing pains. And personally, it's like, I want to be able to fill that need and the interest, but then also thinking strategically for this to be sustainable long term. You can't go from like 0 to 100 that quickly. And so I'm kind of just thinking through how can we approach this in a way where we're serving everybody that we want to serve, but in like a manageable way.
And I would love to kind of dive deeper, but I know we're going to get to a section about future goals. So I would love to hear about what that long-term planning looks like. But before we get there, wanted to just also ask, like, in the same realm of community and community building, how does your organization like address the diverse needs and interests of Muslim American women when it comes to adventure activities, experiences? How are you balancing everything, and specifically, how are you addressing those different needs and wants and asks?
Kind of how you'd also asked a little bit earlier about people just coming from different backgrounds and different, practicing faith in different ways. And so truly, like, my goal is to be able to create a space where you can come and be yourself and not worry about how certain boundaries that you may bring up or concerns will like maybe add a little bit of extra work, but we are focused primarily on being a Muslim first space. And so everyone has, different comfort level with, okay, in terms of like eating halal, zabiha, making sure that we're taking all of that into consideration so that no one has to like feel like they're excluded in like what meals are planned. Prayer times, there's different like schools of thought that pray at different times, so making sure we're considering that. Also people's comfort level on like what types of trips. Some girls only want to join the cabin trip. Some girls are okay if we're like sleeping in tents and on the floor. So everyone's kind of coming from a different place. And so kind of keeping in mind that there's a lot of hesitation because I think our community hasn't really delved into a lot of these outdoor spaces, that there's uncertainty about it. If you go online, any of like these travel groups that already exist, you kind of are just expected to sign up and go through the motions and just join. But I want to make sure that anyone that is hesitant has someone to talk to. And I think that's realistic to do since we're kind of at a smaller scale right now. I've like done one-on-one calls to understand where everyone's coming from to make sure, okay, that's being addressed in this group trip, and seeing how we can make sure we're as inclusive and accommodating for future trips. And so a lot of this happens just like as the situations come up. And so it's really opened my eyes to the way a lot of different people practice and trying to be as accommodating as possible.
Love that, subhanAllah. That's not an easy task. So I applaud you guys for taking that initiative and really being mindful and aware about all these needs and addressing them to your best capabilities, and just always renewing your intentions in that regard as well. There's a lot that I feel like your program and events and these treks sort of touch on in terms of the intersectionality of incorporating faith, adventure, all these things and elements into your programs. How do you do that? What does the structure of these programs look like? How are you balancing
Yeah.
and kind of putting it all together at some of these group trips and events?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really nice when, when you're out, it's a busy day, you're shopping, you're finishing things, and the time for prayer comes. It's really busy. It doesn't matter like where you're at, and you're just struggling to find a place to pray. What's really nice about these trips is that you're truly in the great outdoors, right? There's all this land and space. And being with other Muslim women and being able to pray in Jama'at together is really, really nice. And just being out in nature while you're doing it is something that we, do consistently on all of our group trips. If you're joining even like those smaller outdoor groups that are more focused on other underrepresented groups, maybe it's women or people of color, they're not all Muslim. So you still kind of feel a little ostracized or different when you have to find a quiet place to pray on the side. We also wake up for Fajr together, whether we're camping and we're doing like an outdoor glamping trip. It's really nice to be able to pray and you look up and you see the stars afterwards. Also in the evenings, we do these like campfires where we make s'mores and have really deep reflections. And I think just being in an outdoor space like this makes people more open and more vulnerable and like want to share their stories. And so we've seen that naturally happen in all of our trips. And I want to cultivate more of like the spiritual aspect to it, where people naturally will share their own stories, and you know what faith means to them, but having more of like an Islamic scholarship perspective, or maybe having someone that's more knowledgeable come and share. That that's something that we're hoping to cultivate. We kind of started more as like a group that has folks that have the same identity coming together. But for some girls, like this is the first time they're actually praying in Jama'ah consistently throughout the day. And so we want to make sure that we're prioritizing things like that at the very least, and like adding levels of Islamic knowledge to the programming that we have.
Super cool. Love to hear that. SubhanAllah. I think it's really amazing that some of these experiences are also the first taste in some instances of religiosity and faith, and blending everything in a space that, you know, we've always been told is a great space to kind of like think about and reflect. And I can't even imagine how insanely beautiful that experience is for some of these, Muslim women, subhanAllah. So speaking of just pivoting to kind of talking about impact, future goals for the organization, but also some, long-term things that you guys are thinking about as an organization, would love to kind of just talk about some success stories. Can you share some success stories or transformative experiences that highlight the impact that this organization has in the lives of these Muslim women, who have participated, whether physically, like at these events, but also online, because you do touch upon that online community as well being so crucial.
I mean, like most of these trips, like I mentioned, those campfire reflections, we are moved to tears. After spending, a couple of days together with these women, you develop this sisterhood that I think is so hard to describe and put into words. But subhanAllah, there's been some girls sharing stories where they had made dua, going on when they went on Umrah a couple months prior to find this sisterhood and community, and they found it through this gathering. Or maybe someone that was flying into this trip from a completely different state and city and was lacking a Muslim community there, and had desperately wanted to find a place where they can find, folks that they identify with and also participate in like these activities. We've had girls meet each other through these trips and continue to travel together, which is my favorite. A couple of girls that came on the trip I did up to Lhasa National Park last May. They went to Oregon together, like 4 or 5 of them. And so that's just like really heartwarming for me, because you really create long-lasting bonds through these trips because you find these like-minded women. And I think that's the most special and meaningful for me. And through like the online community and just my online presence, as much as I try to keep it up, I share some of my crazy adventures with like, take it with a grain of salt. This is not for everybody. I'm not telling everybody to go travel to a foreign country and climb a mountain. But it's at least like encourage girls to rethink what they're capable of. Maybe to you, your adventure is, driving 3 hours and staying in a cabin for 2 nights with, couple of your close friends. So everyone is kind of pushing themselves out of their comfort zone based on what they're comfortable with. I remember for me, the biggest hurdle was once I started doing longer road trips to different states and convincing my parents that I was going to be safe, no problem. That was in 2021, 2022 to like this past year and early 2024, I was like different countries climbing mountains. So everyone has their own journey, starts in a different place. And I think like just being able to visualize that and see people's experiences online really changes what you think you can do. And I distinctly remember 2019, I saw a girl on Instagram that had just trekked to Everest Base Camp, was like posting pictures, and I was just in awe. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I slid into her DMs. I love finding cool people online and just like introducing myself and saying hi and whatever. And I went back to search for that DM, and I said something like, oh, I saw you did Everest Base Camp. My dream to do it one day. And subhanAllah, 4 years later, 2023 last year was when I actually did it with other Arab women. I didn't think it would happen that quickly, I remember looking at those pictures on my phone screen thinking, this is a dream to do one day. So subhanAllah, making it a reality. And as much as I could have seen pictures of anybody doing that trek, it was something about seeing a hijabi woman doing it that really gave me that idea and planted that seed.
Full circle moment. That's so, I love to hear that. Love hearing those stories. And I I think it's building a sense of foundation for some of these women to be able to find adventure continuously, giving them the taste of what that feels like. And then once you kind of have that taste and you have something that you can kind of fall back on, it's only more inspiring to keep on going. So speaking of sisterhood, touching upon these like themes of sisterhood, camaraderie, how has, you know, the adventuring scene generally, what have you noticed about the adventuring space, an experience that has helped build this sense of community, of sisterhood and camaraderie amongst people in Metwa?
I will say just outdoorsy people or people in the adventurous space, we're not high maintenance. Like a lot of us, like I mentioned, are really open-minded. We're okay with roughing it. We go on really hard hikes. You're breathing really heavily. You don't really look good at all. It's about how you feel, right? You're really pushing yourself to the limit and you're building character and you're getting these experiences and these memories together that I think really unites all of us. So like I mentioned, the sisterhood and the vulnerability and openness really comes from just being those sorts of people that are naturally just gravitate to these spaces, you know? I was talking to a friend recently about how when you think of like this image of a Muslim woman, a lot of times through social media, we're just like flooded with hijabi fashion and beauty and makeup and I always wonder why that is. Maybe it's because these are just like really accessible, like hobbies or interests where you're in the comfort of your own home or your own like city, and you're just naturally more drawn to more of the aesthetics of how you look or how that makes you feel and the whole beauty part of it. But I also think that we just don't see enough images of the types of women that really love the adventure and exploring. And I think we're out there. There just wasn't really, you know, as much of an emphasis on showing and highlighting those experiences. And that's what I really wanted to do through Metwa, to bring people together that are okay getting dirty and, you know, doing these things outside, because that's what makes me happy. And I think that's naturally what I'm drawn to. And after hearing so many stories of girls that wanted the same, I think we are truly changing the narrative of what it means to be a Muslim woman. And as I was posting stories from Hijab Day, and I asked our members to just send in pictures of themselves covered doing really cool things. Hijabi women that were scuba diving, that were rock climbing, that were horseback, that were riding horses, mountaineering, doing really cool things. And I was like, I wish we saw more of that. That's what inspired me to get into all of it. And I'm hoping that we can slowly move the needle through everyone else's stories that we're sharing online.
Well, speaking of, I feel like, you know, you kind of alluded to like, we don't really see that. We don't see that narrative as much as, you know, we'd hope for. And I wonder, like, perhaps why, and kind of, we don't know why. I don't know if it's convenience or just like we don't see it. But I also feel like sometimes there's a level of stereotype that comes with like,
yeah,
so some of these like and it's not taboo, but like oftentimes either it's cultural, whatever it might be, these misconceptions of adventuring and what that looks like for Muslim women. So I would love to kind of hear your perspective from this organization. What ways has Metwa kind of contributed to breaking such stereotypes and misconceptions about Muslim women doing really cool outdoorsy adventurous things?
Yeah, I can share because I experienced a lot of those things, and coming from a family that I wouldn't say is too traditional and conservative, but as with any, you know, parents that are coming from a different country, and a lot of us are second generation immigrants, and it's just there's this fear around things that we don't know about. And so getting more into like these intense activities and these longer trips, I remember sitting with my parents for hours just trying to understand what is it that they're so concerned with. You know, naturally as parents, my dad has 3 daughters, you know, he worries about us constantly. It's like, what are they worried about, you know? And I, as the engineering brain in me was like trying to figure out what are the problems so that I can figure out what to address it, how I can address it. And so it came down to one, you know, once I got into more of the advanced and harder hikes, virtually impossible to find other girls to do it with, I would go with a bunch of guys just because I love it and not because, you know. So I like fell into that situation. And then also sometimes I would just go solo if I couldn't find anyone. So when it came down to like me identifying the 2 issues that they had, I was like, okay, it can't just be my parents that are concerned about this. We have to have some sort of a way where, Muslim women can go together on these experiences because other parents probably have the same concern. And that was exactly it. I hear of so many girls where there's this stigma and just uncertainty and fear that a lot of our parents have around letting their girls go off on their own and do things, just certain boundaries and comfort level. You don't want to go in a mixed group. And that adds like another layer of complexity in planning. And so I founded Metwa because I realized there's like a clear gap in the space and a need for these Muslim women only spaces. And the interest that everyone has shown and how receptive people have been in just joining these trips immediately when we post them has just proven that it's filling a much needed, a big gap in the industry as it is now. And so, I mean, for me, it came from like the challenges that I had experienced. And I talk with a lot of girls that are signing up for these trips where sometimes when it's under like an organization or a collective or an institution like this, when I talk to my parents, I'm like, oh, I'm just going off and traveling on my own. I'm going with Metwa Collective. They run group trips. They have this reputation, creating these open and welcoming spaces, really organized trips for people like us. It provides an extra level of comfort, instead of me just saying I'm like disappearing with my friend for a couple of days on my own. So I think all of that kind of has answered a lot of the concerns our parents have had. And culturally and religiously, family is really important. And so we want to be able to include our parents in all these decisions that we're making at every point and stage in your life, because you're older, you don't just go off and make your own decisions. And one thing that I want to talk about is like something I'm excited about, and that generational shift that I think we're creating through some of the trips we're planning for the older women in our community and for our moms. And so I ran a trip around Mother's Day weekend last year, mother-daughter trip, me and my mom, other girls my age and their moms. And I can honestly say that was like the most fun our moms have had in a while. And you realize that our parents are so focused on taking care of us that they don't take care of themselves. And so things like this just make me really excited because these are things that our moms and our parents were worried about for us. But when you really bring them in and give them a chance to experience it, we're just, inshallah, opening the floodgates and like providing this opportunity for so many other girls. So stay tuned. This May, we'll have more mother-daughter trips.
Inshallah. Oh my gosh, I will have to check that out. Oh my goodness, that's so crazy because, I really can relate to the narrative of that at home, and they mean well. My dad also has 3 daughters, raised us, to be strong, independent women. But when it comes to just being out there doing crazy things, it's naturally terrifying. And as long as ideally you have people to do that with, it really brings comfort. And making sure they know that we're safe is really super, super important. So I would love to kind of dive even deeper. We talked about breaking those stereotypes and where that stems from and how we can go about communicating that in sort of a shared space. But what role does Metwa specifically play in promoting now a positive narrative when it comes to just like the broader Muslim women in society? I think it's so beautiful that like this is for me, and I in our earlier conversations, I kind of alluded to the fact that like I was also praying for something like this. Like in undergrad, I recall not having a space or girlies to go and do these crazy things with. And it's not because I don't know. I don't know what the why is, but it just like was harder to kind of get girls on board to do some of these things. And so how does Metwa play a key role in just promoting a positive narrative when it comes to just the larger discourse on Muslim women in society? And I suppose like there isn't any limitations for them, but what is Metwa doing in terms of reshaping this positive narrative?
I firmly believe our faith, how we choose to dress modestly, shouldn't impact what you can really accomplish or do. Sure, it adds maybe extra level of thought and consideration. When I'm going out for a run, I'm wearing more clothes. When I'm like trekking or backpacking, I'm thinking about who I'm going with, where are the water sources so I can make wudu, little things like that I think, not really knowing a lot of people in the space before this, I was struggling to know who to ask these questions to. And so I think just by seeing others that look like you doing it and having that positive community really encourages a lot of Muslim women to experiment and explore and try it out. Because I truly believe that there's some of us that innately have the sense of wonder and curiosity and free spirit and discovery and want to explore and adventure. But it really like saddens me to think that a lot of girls never have and maybe even never will, just because of like the cultural stigma around, you know, a woman going off and traveling, even with a group, you know. And so we always have like these larger group trips so that safety isn't a concern. But it makes me sad that there's probably so many that never get this chance. And the narrative that I'm hoping we can push is that, you know, Islam, it doesn't limit us, you know, and our hijab doesn't limit us, that you can dress modestly and you can participate in all of these really incredible, cool, fun, fulfilling things that really, really make you feel good. And I personally want to see more adventurous Muslim women, you know. I see a lot of modest fashion online, a lot of beauty bloggers, which is great. People have those passions and pursuits and we see it like front and center. But I think there's a whole nother image of what a Muslim woman can also do that maybe is a little bit more, I mean, for me, I love physical activity and sports and activities like this, that I just want to see more stories like that. And I think we're slowly chipping away by highlighting these stories on Metla, and also bringing people in, and they eventually are going to be leaders in this community, and they'll slowly start to push their own previously perceived limits on what they can do physically. And it just really makes you feel good. Anyone that like says they hate camping or hate running or hate sports like this never really gave themselves a chance to experience it, you know. And like, wellness and health, you know, is really important in Islam, and being able to combine all of that and be in a natural space that's really grounded and being around God's creation, I think is so special. And these are all things that we want to cultivate through Metla Collective.
Your body has a right upon you, and you need to be able to fulfill that in healthy ways. And so absolutely. Absolutely. And so this is actually, so I don't know how the time has flown, but we're heading into the second last question before I ask my favorite one to all guests to conclude our conversation. Let's look to the future, you know, as we plan and look forward. Of course, it's uncertain, but everything is also, we're comforted in knowing that things are written for you, that whatever happens, happens. But I would love to kind of just hear in this last, question, as you look to the future, as Metwa looks to the future, what are your goals for Metwa? And how do you see and hope to see it evolve? And what does that look like in the next coming years, 5, 10 years? What does Metwa look like? And what do you hope for it to become in the future?
Wow, this is a great question. Something I have started to think about, something I know I need to think about more. One of my mentors in this accelerator program was actually asking me last week what my 5-year plan is with Metwa. And I struggle to answer it just because I'm very much in the weeds of it. A lot of growing pains because there's so much interest in our trips and I'm running a couple simultaneously and my mind is just all over the place. And so sometimes you really lose sight of the bigger goal. And in those moments where I feel really stressed out and overwhelmed with all the things that I'm planning, I think back to just the individual experiences and the stories that I've heard from girls that have attended these trips and how much this has changed their life, which already makes me feel like mission accomplished, right? Like someone has gotten something good from this, and that makes me very satisfied. But long term, I really want this to grow into like a sustainable initiative in business. It's been really overwhelming, but I'm hoping that with a team, we can start to run more experiences to really understand our community and where they're coming from and what their preferences are and what's missing. We've been doing a lot of these shorter weekend trips. I feel like there's a low barrier to entry when you're only committing like over your weekend, when you already have time off. Eventually trying to see how much of our community is interested in longer trips, how many of our girls are more advanced and want to go on harder treks and want to travel to a different country and experience different cultures. I think a lot of people have never really had that chance to travel because they've never had a group of women to travel with, and it's not always safe to go by yourself. And so those are like the obvious things that we're missing before. So figuring out how we can create more opportunities for girls to join on the experiences that we're planning and to partner with other groups that are already planning experiences like this. And so I'm really excited about the potential. I still haven't answered my mentor when she asked me about the 5-year plans because I realize I'm in the weeds of it right now, just like getting through day by day what needs to be done. And I'm like reminding myself that sometimes you just have to take a step back and like think big picture. And alhamdulillah, I think there's a lot of potential, and I'm excited to see where Metwa goes. And, if anything, it's provided opportunities for women that I may not even know. And it causes just this domino effect, like I mentioned, of just women getting the confidence to go out and explore themselves and then sharing that with their community. So yeah, I'll have to think on that because I haven't thought about the 5-year vision yet. But as someone that's overly ambitious, it will be big. And even if we don't accomplish it, at the very least, the original goal we've met.
Yeah. Inshallah. Shoot your shot. I mean, the worst thing you can do is you don't know what you're going to miss because if you don't take it
Exactly.
originally, you got to just try it out. And if it lands, it lands. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Love to hear that. Inshallah. Well, really excited to see where this takes you and takes so many Muslim women. Really, inshallah, whatever is meant for y'all, it's going to happen. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah and really rahmah in this experience for the good, really awesome work that you guys are doing there at Metwa. Fun question to really conclude today's conversation that I've really, really, really appreciated, and hopefully lots of listeners are too. What is a lesson learned that you know now that you wish you could have told your younger self?
Wow. This is a really good question. Your life isn't and doesn't have to be linear. And a quote that really resonates with me is that your life doesn't have to be a novel. It can be a book of stories. And so I can say quite honestly, when the layoff had happened in November 22, I was working full time as a software engineer at a big tech company. And so it hit me kind of hard. And I just felt like, what am I going to do after this? Like it wasn't clear. There was so much uncertainty. I ended up just following my gut and doing what felt right, the things that I was passionate about, the things that just made the most sense to me, both professionally and personally. I started traveling more, got into doing these really cool treks and getting into mountaineering, which was such a blessing. Professionally, I shifted from just being a software engineer to doing research in public interest tech, which is, a lot more fulfilling because you're thinking about technology and ethics and society. And so I truly have that underlying theme in a lot of what I pursue, where it's about how this is affecting the people around us, whether that's, the technology that we're building, or whether that's like being in spaces where people feel welcome. And sometimes I figure out, like, sometimes I think about, how did I even end up here? It's just, my journey has been so chaotic. I've lived in California my whole life. Started nomading when I got laid off, was like so many different places, different times. Go up to Washington State every summer because I loved hiking and spent time with friends there. Moved to the East Coast. I'm at Boston now. My fellowship is at Harvard. And so these are spaces that I never thought I would be in. And I try to reconcile how I can pursue this more professional route with my personal hobbies of traveling and climbing mountains and now running a travel group. So it just all sounds really odd and different, but it's things that are just fulfilling to me and just make sense in my mind. And I'd love to see how far I can take it. I can honestly say that younger Nadah would never have believed this is where she would end up. And I can't really tell you what a year from now is going to look like for me. But I really feel like just following your gut, and don't underestimate yourself. If you don't have all the answers for something, that doesn't mean you can't try it out. And like I said, sometimes you have to experiment and iterate. Sometimes you have to be your own cheerleader. If there's no one else that's doing something that you want to do, just do it yourself and hype yourself up. Even if I wasn't getting that positive reassurance and validation from other people, I, made sure that I at least was grounded enough to know whatever the outcome is, having tawakkul, this was meant to be. And I think I started to pick up on little signs that started feeling like this is my path. And I talk about the story of how I was laid off on November 9th. And exactly a year later, November 9th, 2023 was when I got accepted into the accelerator program with REI and Founded Outdoors. SubhanAllah, you can't make that up, to the day, same day. And I was like, this is a sign that they believe in the vision from Metwa. I still believe in it, and I'm investing, so much of my time and energy and soul into it that, it makes sense to pursue. As hesitant as I was, I kept kind of doubting myself as someone that never thought they would be an entrepreneur, but always just saw problems and wanted to solve it, to thinking, okay, we have so many role models in our religion. Khadija radiallahu anha, who was a businesswoman and an entrepreneur, she is like an image of what we can also try to accomplish. And so just hearing stories like that really kind of resonated with me, and I ended up in this place for a reason. And so I'm just gonna continue to see where it goes. But yeah, I never would have believed that this is where I would end up. SubhanAllah.
Subhanallah, subhanallah, things happen for a reason, and you really just have to have trust in Allah and the greater plan, because He is the best of planners. Despite everything that we sort of think is best for us, He knows better. Alhamdulillah, it really makes me so happy to hear, and I cannot wait to see what the year does have in store for you, what years to come has in store for you. Absolutely wishing you the bestest. Thank you again so much, Nadah, for joining us, for chatting all things adventure and passion for the outdoors, and really embodying all of that in Matwa Collective. Thank you so much. And inshallah, wishing you and Matwa the absolute best.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate your time and for allowing me to share my story.
Ladies, you heard it here. Today's episode, Chasing Peaks and Faith. We talked about all things empowering Muslim women through exploration. This podcast illuminated the transformative impact of the adventure community through Matwa Collective, breaking stereotypes and for promoting a positive narrative, while also kind of chatting all things about the evolution of Matwa. Thank you again for listening, and I'll catch you again next time in an episode of Coffee Chats with Aisha. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.